1992. A dimly lit pub in Minsk hummed with the low murmurs of conversations, the clinking of glasses punctuating the heavy air. Minsk was a city caught between two worlds, one foot in the crumbling Soviet past, the other stepping into uncertain future. The collapse of USSR left Belarus in economic and political turmoil. At night, Lenin Avenue, now Independence Avenue, grew dim from hastily opened bars and casinos contrasting with the dark alleys where black market deals and fights were frequent. At one of those nights, Vidmantas, a young, good-looking man, approached the bar, his voice smooth but edged with something unspoken as he addressed the woman standing by the counter.
Free?
The woman was striking, even in a dimly lit room. She stood out from everyone else.
For you, always.
She replied with a flicker of her hair, a coy smile playing on her lips.
Then let's have a drink. My treat.
She didn't object. And just like that, a connection was made. Some would say it was fate, but those who knew them might have called it something else. A meeting of kindred spirits, drawn together by shared darkness that will lead to the fourth death sentence in independent Lithuania's history. Vidmantas Žibaitis was only 27 at the time, yet his past was already stained with violence. A troubled childhood had sharpened him, an unstable home where bottles clinked more often than kind words were exchanged. At this point in time, these types of family dynamics were common all across post-USSR countries. Sadly, the streets raised Vidmantas more than his own family. At 13, still a schoolboy in Krekenava, he made his first move into crime. Knife in hand, blocking a woman's path, demanding money. The act landed him in a juvenile correction institute, the infamous Velučionis Special Vocational School No. 1, where troubled youth were meant to learn a trade. Instead, many like Vidmantas honed something else entirely, a need for violence. Adulthood did not soften him either. By the time he stood before the judge for the first time, he had already committed an act so vile that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard the details. Drunk and devoid of empathy, he preyed on a defenseless 13-year-old boy, subjecting him to unspeakable sexual horrors before stabbing him repeatedly and stealing his wristwatch. 6 years behind bars was the price he paid. Far too little, I would say. A beast that shows its teeth like that needs to be put down. Upon his release, his mother and stepfather, hopeful despite his past, provided him with a fresh start, a place to live, furniture, an opportunity to rebuild. But Vidmantas was not one for second chances. He sold it all, drank away the money, and continued his descent. Evening of March 19. Vidmantas, a bottle in his hand and tension on his face, steps into his parents' home, where his mother, stepfather, and grandparents are already seated at the table. At first, everything seems like an ordinary evening, but soon the conversation takes a sharp turn.
I have no money, nowhere to live.
Vidmantas is broke, homeless, and demanding answers, but his stepfather isn't willing to back down.
I gave you rubles. I let you live in my house. I bought you furniture. What more do you want? You have everything you need. Get a job and live your life.
But working is the last thing Vidmantas wants. His demands grow bolder. He wants his stepfather to sell this apartment and give him all the money. The refusal sparks his fury. Violence erupts, unexpected and brutal. His mother tries to intervene, but that only escalates the situation. He not only strikes her, but grabs a fork from the table, attempting to stab her. She barely manages to dodge in time. After failing to attack his mother, his eyes lock onto his grandfather.
You will give me money and let me stay with you.
But the old man refuses. He doesn't even need to say it. His silence is enough, and to Vidmantas, that silence is an insult. He knocks his grandfather to the ground, kicking him in the head before finally stomping on his chest. The old man loses consciousness. He still doesn't stop. His rage seeks another target. His grandmother also can't escape the violence. Vidmantas looks her in the eyes and says,
What are you still standing here for?
He strikes. Another victim falls. But luckily, everyone survives. Of course, the family doesn't want anything to do more with Vidmantas, so he flees the country like a little coward. Jelena Ustinovič, at 39, nearly a decade older than Vidmantas, had her own history. A past peppered with theft, failed marriages, and a long list of fleeting lovers. Men she met over drinks and took to bed without hesitation. Vidmantas was just another name to add to that list. There are very little details about Jelena, so that's sort of all we know. But let's get back to that Minsk bar. Their night took them from the bar to a decrepit apartment on Demokratų Street, a space owned by one of Yelena's acquaintances, a man named Vladimiras. A beggar in all but name, Vladimir survived by scavenging landfill scraps. His home was nothing more than a collection of salvaged furniture, a military cot, a battered mattress, a broken cabinet, but he was generous, asking for no rent, only companionship, and, when possible, a shared drink, until one day he made the mistake of asking too much.
My daughter and grandkids are visiting,
He said hesitantly.
I need the place.
Vidmantas' response was immediate and brutal. Fist flew, boots followed. The old man's cries for help echoed through the apartment walls, but no one came. The neighbors had long learned that interference was dangerous. When Vladimir's body was found much later, it was already decomposing, stripped of everything, including his shoes. The cause of death was clear: a crushed skull, shattered beyond recognition. With Minsk now tainted by their crime, Vidmantas and Jelena fled to Lithuania. Kaunas was their next hunting ground. Stepping off the train, their thoughts were singular: find a way to make money, get food, and above all, get drinks. Tautvydas J, a local, never saw them coming.
Do you know where to get some cheap booze here?
Vidmantas asked him.
We could drink it together later on.
Tautvydas took the bait. Soon, they were in his Čiurlionys Street apartment. Bottles quickly emptied, the mood shifting. When he was drunk enough, Vidmantas struck, a blow to the head, the sound of a body hitting the floor. Then, the real brutality began. He and Jelena tied Tautvydas up, kicked him until bones snapped, until life left him. Jelena was not an innocent bystander. By all accounts, she was the one to push Vidmantas for that violence, enjoying the drama and pain that others suffered. The spoils? A battered radio, a pair of hole-ridden socks, a cheap trinket worth 10 coupons, a meager price for a life taken. But for monsters like these, a drop of booze is more important than any part of humanity. March 1992, the countryside in Panevėžys was waking to the promise of spring. The air was crisp and the earth frothing. In the village of Šalai, an old man named Vlad was settling in for the night when a knock disturbed the quiet. Two figures stood outside, a young man and a slightly older woman. He recognized them. They had stayed here once before.
Father, let us in for the night.
The man pleaded.
We have nowhere else to go. I'm ill.
Vlad replied, voice weary.
I barely stand on my own 2 feet. I can't take care of anyone else. Try the neighbors.
He moved to close the door, but Vidmantas was faster. The punch landed hard, sending the old man crashing to the ground, blood pooling at his feet. Then the kicking started. Vlad wasn't lying. He really was ill. His frail body crumpled under the assault, his livers rupturing from the blows. Consciousness flickered, fading with each hit. When his body could take no more, they dragged him to his bed, tied his feet together, and demanded money.
Please,
he whispered, his voice barely a breath.
Take whatever you want. Just don't hurt me anymore.
By then, it was too late. Death had already settled in his bones, and Vidmantas had not a drop of a human soul left. He could have just stolen the man's things. They were two way younger and healthier people, but money was more of a excuse. The attackers ransacked his home, taking little, some savings meant for burial expenses, a slab of lard, a string of sausages, and a bottle of vodka. Satisfied, they slammed the door behind them and vanished into the night. Days later, concerned neighbors noticed something amiss.
Weird. The old man's cow hasn't been tended to. The silence from his home was unusual. He would at least come out to say hi every day, without a miss.
When they stepped inside, the sight was horrifying. His body beaten beyond recognition, bounded, lifeless. By all regards, Vlad was still alive when they left him, barely hanging to consciousness, but with wounds so brutal, he was too weak to call out for help. And in these types of villages, even if you scream, your neighbors might be too far away to even hear it. Vlad could have screamed for help in his house as life faded from him, all for a bottle of vodka and a slab of lard. It wasn't long before the police had their suspect. Vidmantas was already known to them, a man with a past that made him an easy target for suspicion. When captured, he confessed with a chilling ease. recounting these events without hesitation. But in court, his demeanor shifted. He recanted, claiming he never intended to kill, swearing on the Bible in a desperate bid for leniency. The trial was swift but thorough. Witnesses recounted his actions, forensic evidence sealed his fate, and the prosecutors painted him as a remorseless killer. The defense attempted to argue that the murders were not premeditated, but the judges were unmoved. The verdict was inevitable: death by a firing squad. It was the fourth such sentence in the history of independent Lithuania, a grim reminder that punishment came with a barrel of a gun. Jelena Ustinovič, on the other hand, managed to avoid the same fate. The court determined that while she was encouraging the crimes, she was more of an instigator than direct participant. Her punishments was severe but not fatal: 9 years behind bars. Some believe she had been lucky. Others thought that justice had been served. In 1994, January 27th, Vidmantas met his end before a line of rifles. His execution carried out with cold efficiency. The stories of those final executions remain an interesting question. Would you like these people to sit in our jails? Do you think that Žibaitis truly, in any way, deserved our forgiveness? Personally, I am of the belief that if you're willing to take a life, you should be willing to give yours up. The best part of these stories, for me, are always when I get to read out loud how these monsters are removed from our world. They don't deserve anything more. Sorry for this small tangent. But thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or maybe even share this video. Everything gives you karma points. Thanks again, stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll see you next time.